Picture a jellyfish drifting in black water at 1,200 meters. Your brain files it under one simple label, one animal. Now here's the true, unsettling part. It's not one animal at all. It's a colony, dozens, sometimes hundreds or more, of genetically identical individuals fused into one living chain, each one specialized like a body part. Scientists call them zooids. And when some siphonophores reach full length, they're not big jellies. They're more like a living, stinging drift net that can stretch for tens of meters, with some reports pushing past 100 meters for certain species. So when you see one in an ROV-like cone, and it looks like a delicate ribbon, what you're really looking at is something closer to a modular organism, a distributed creature that hunts, moves, and reproduces using a team of specialized bodies acting as one. And once you understand that, the deep ocean stops feeling empty. Let's drop. At the surface, the ocean is loud with sunlight. Waves glitter. Everything is readable. Even when you don't know a species name, you can still understand the vibe. Fish swim, predators chase, jellyfish pulse. Now imagine the descent. A few hundred meters down, color gets stolen. Reds vanish first, then oranges. The water becomes a colder blue, then a darker blue, then a kind of dimness that feels like permanent evening. Then you pass the point where sunlight is simply gone. At 1,200 meters, you are deep in the dark, well into a world where the only light is what living things make, and what we bring. The harsh, focused beams of an ROV cutting through drifting particles like headlights in fog. This is the part of the ocean that doesn't behave like the ocean in your mind, because here, movement is expensive. Food is not everywhere. Most of the time, the open water looks like nothing, an endless, pressurized black, and then you see something that makes your brain glitch. Not a shark, not a giant mouth, a graceful, almost delicate structure like a transparent string, a ribbon, or a floating chandelier hanging in the water column. It looks like one animal. It looks like a jellyfish stretched into a line, but it isn't one. It's a colony that learned how to be a body. To understand siphonophores, you have to delete one assumption, that one creature always means one organism. Because siphonophores are colonial hydrozoans, members of the same broader group as jellyfish and corals, but their trick is how they build themselves. A siphonophore begins as a single individual, and then it buds off clones that never separate. Those clones specialize into different jobs, like organs in a body, but they remain individual zooids. So the whole thing behaves like one animal, while technically being a team that cannot survive if separated. That's why calling it a jellyfish is both understandable and wrong. The vibe is jelly-like, sure, but the structure is closer to a living corporation. One genome, many employees, each hired for a single role. And when you realize that, the fear shifts. Because you stop asking, how big is that jellyfish? And you start asking, how big is that colony? Now, before we get to the terrifying full-size part, let's make the colony concept visual, because it's easy to say colony and still not feel it. Think of a siphonophore as a train, one long central stem like a cable. Along that cable are repeated modules, zooids, each shaped for a specific task. Some are built for movement, little swimming bells that pulse and push. Some are built for feeding, polyps that handle prey and digestion. Some are built for reproduction, units that make eggs and sperm. Some are built for defense and capture, tentacles and stinging structures that function like weapons. NOAA's own descriptions emphasize exactly this. Siphonophores are colonies of zooids, with specialized individuals handling swimming, feeding, reproduction, and defense. So when you see a siphonophore drifting, it's not drifting the way a jellyfish drifts. It's drifting the way a designed system drifts. A coordinated organism made of specialized, repeated bodies. And here's the part that makes the deep ocean feel alien. In a siphonophore, body parts are not tissues. They are individuals, Your stomach is a stomach in the normal sense. It's a zooid whose entire existence is be a stomach. Your propulsion isn't muscle. It's a zooid whose entire existence is be a swimming bell. Your reproduction is gonads. It's a zooid whose entire existence is make babies. And they're all connected, sharing nutrients and signals. So it's not a loose swarm. It's a single integrated colony that behaves like one creature. If that sounds like science fiction, like a biological mecha made of units, it's because it kind of is, just naturally. Now, why does this happen in the deep ocean? Because the deep ocean rewards two things: efficiency, scale without speed. At 1,200 meters, fast chasing is expensive. So predators evolve strategies that let them feed while spending as little energy as possible. A siphonophore can do something terrifyingly effective. It can spread out long tentacles and become a net. Not a net made of rope, a net made of stinging cells. And because it's long, it can intercept prey that would otherwise be scattered across huge volumes of water. That's the deep ocean logic. If prey is rare, you either travel far or you become something large enough that prey runs into you. Siphonophores choose the second option. They become the trap. Now let's talk about the stings, because this is where jellyfish comparisons are accurate. Siphonophores are cnidarians, and cnidarians hunt using specialized stinging cells called cnidocytes, which can fire tiny harpoon-like structures. Those stinging structures are concentrated in tentacles and little substructures often called tentilla, basically ammo clusters along the line. That means a siphonophore can operate like a fishing line with hundreds of hooks, and the hooks are microscopic harpoons loaded with venom. So when we say full size is terrifying, it's not just length, it's surface area of weaponry. A long siphonophore is not just a long animal. It's a long stretch of active capture tools floating in darkness. But how long are we talking? Let's keep it real and grounded. Some species like Praya Dubia, often called a giant siphonophore, are described as reaching up to about 50 meters in length in some references. Thin, broomstick-like, but extremely long. And then you get the headline grabber, a Polemia uvaria, a siphonophore that has been reported at extreme lengths. Guinness World Records lists a longest siphonophore record at 119 meters associated with a Polemia uvaria. Now, important reality check. Measuring something like this in open water is hard. Colonies can be stretched, contracted, tangled, partially broken, and the ocean is not a lab table. So the safest, truthful framing is: siphonophores can reach tens of meters, and some records reports for certain species describe lengths over 100 meters. Even if you ignore the most extreme claims and stick to tens of meters, it's still wild. Because at 1,200 meters, tens of meters long is basically the difference between a predator you might miss in the darkness, a predator that can occupy your entire light cone like a floating fence. Now let's do the cinematic version, because this is exactly how people get fooled. An ROV descends through black water. The lights show particles, occasional tiny flashes, a jelly drifting like a parachute. Then off to the side, you see something thin and pale, just a line. You think it's debris, or a fishing line, or a strand of marine snow caught in a current. Then the line branches. Then you notice tiny repeating units along it, like beads. Then you see fine hair-like threads extending outward, almost invisible until they catch the light. And suddenly your brain reclassifies it. That's alive. And the longer you watch, the worse it gets, because you realize the line doesn't end where you think it ends. It continues beyond the light, and beyond that, and beyond that. The scariest siphonophore isn't the one you can see. It's the one you can't see fully, because your light only shows a small section of something that may stretch far outside your frame. That's the psychological horror of the deep sea. The camera doesn't show emptiness. It shows a small bubble of visibility surrounded by a universe. So when something enters that bubble and you can't see its end, your instincts wake up. Okay, so how does this colony actually function like one animal? This is where siphonophores become one of the best biology rewrites you can show your audience, because they force you to see bodies differently. Many siphonophores have a front end that handles buoyancy or propulsion. Some have a gas-filled float in certain forms. A well-known surface relative is the Portuguese man-o'-war, also a siphonophore, while many deep-sea ones rely on swimming bells and drifting behavior. Along the colony, zooids repeat in patterns. The arrangement matters because it determines how efficiently it moves, how it spreads tentacles, where it puts reproductive structures, how it handles captured prey. And here's the key: the zooids are not random. They're built like a modular machine: propulsion units, feeding units, reproductive units, defensive capture units. NOAA uses exactly this framing. Different zooids specialized for swimming, feeding, reproduction, and defense. So the colony is literally organized labor. Now let's talk about hunting, because colony is interesting, but your title is about why full size is terrifying. In the deep ocean, siphonophores hunt in a few nightmare-efficient ways. 1. Drift net mode. The colony hangs in the water column with tentacles extended. Small crustaceans, larval fish, and other drifting organisms bump into the tentacles, get stung, and are reeled in toward feeding zooids. 2. Active positioning. Some siphonophores can pulse swimming bells to adjust depth and orientation, enough to reposition the net, not necessarily to chase prey like a torpedo. 3. Light as bait, and this is where it becomes truly abyssal. Many siphonophores are bioluminescent, glowing green, blue, sometimes even red, and this light can function in defense, communication, and in some cases, attraction of prey. WHOI notes deepwater siphonophores are often bioluminescent and suggests it likely attracts prey. And then there's the deep-sea genus Irena, which has become famous because researchers have described it using bioluminescent lures on tentacles to attract fish. An offensive use of light that feels like an anglerfish strategy, but distributed across a colony. So you can end up with something like this: a long, nearly invisible colony, with small points of light along its capture structures, flickering like bait in the dark, while the real danger is the net you don't see. That's not a monster story. That's documented deep-sea ecology. Now let's anchor it back to 1,200 meters, because depth matters for the vibe. At 1,200 meters, you're deep enough that sunlight is gone. Bioluminescence becomes a primary, visual language. Many animals are adapted to low energy budgets, and gelatinous predators can dominate because drifting is cheaper than chasing. Siphonophores thrive in this logic. They don't need to be armored like crabs. They don't need to be muscular like tuna. They need to be long, coordinated, and armed with stinging capture lines. And the deep ocean gives them the space to do it. Here's the next twist most people miss. The colony isn't just long, it's reconfigurable. Siphonophores can contract and expand. Tentacles can retract. Sections can bend. The whole thing can coil, so a siphonophore might look like a short cluster one moment, and then unspool into a much longer structure when it feeds, which means the full size can be invisible until it decides to deploy. That's the deep-sea version of a switchblade, not because it's malicious, because it's efficient. Let's make this concrete with a familiar analogy. Imagine you see a single glowing lure in the dark and you think, that's one animal. Now imagine you move closer and realize that glow is one module, and the thing behind it is not a single body. It's a chain, and the chain has dozens of specialized units. And the chain can stretch far beyond your light, so you're not approaching a jellyfish. You're approaching a system. That's what makes siphonophores so good for your channel's theme. They feel like an alien organism that's built from parts, because they are. Now, why doesn't everybody talk about siphonophores the way they talk about sharks? 2 reasons. First, they're fragile. A lot of siphonophores are so delicate that traditional nets destroy them or turn them into unrecognizable fragments. That's why live ROV footage has been a game changer for public awareness and scientific observation. Second, they don't fit the monster template. They don't have a single scary face. They don't roar. They don't chase the camera. They do something worse for human psychology. They look delicate. They look harmless. They look like floating lace. And then you learn they're a coordinated colony armed with stinging nets that can reach absurd lengths. That contrast is what makes people feel unsettled, because your instincts are trained to fear teeth, not architecture. Now, let's talk about how scientists actually classify and describe them without getting lost in jargon. The big takeaway is, there are different body plans among siphonophores, and scientists review them by how their modules are arranged and what structures they have. If you ever want to go full nerd, there are formal reviews of siphonophore diversity and body plans. But you don't need the taxonomy to feel the reality. A siphonophore is a colony that evolved into a single coordinated predator. That's enough. Now imagine what it's like to meet one at depth. You're in a submersible or watching an ROV feed. The lights are on and you're drifting in the mid-water. Then something appears, a translucent, ribbon-like structure. It doesn't pulse like a jellyfish. It doesn't swim like a fish. It just occupies space. And because it's translucent, your eyes keep losing it against the black background, like trying to look at a clear fishing line at night. Then the tentacles catch the beam and you see them, fine threads extending outward. And suddenly you understand how the colony feeds. It doesn't need to chase anything. Everything else is moving in the water column. Zooplankton drifting, small fish migrating, crustaceans cruising. The siphonophore just needs to be in the right place at the right time with the net deployed. At 1,200 meters, where the ocean is a three-dimensional wilderness, that is a terrifying advantage, because it turns the water itself into a hunting ground. Here's another part that makes siphonophores feel too weird to be real. Because they are modular, you can see repeated patterns along the body like a biological assembly line. Some sections look like tiny bells, some look like little sacs, some look like flowers, some look like beads. It can look like an art installation, but it's functional. Every weird-looking piece has a job, and the colony is one integrated animal in behavior. NOAA's descriptions of zooids specialized for different functions are the simplest, most grounded way to say it. Now let's zoom out to the terrifying full size, line one more time and land it with honesty. If you see a siphonophore in footage, you are often seeing a portion of it, or a contracted configuration, or a colony oriented in a way that hides its total length. So the correct emotional reaction is, that looks like a weird jellyfish. It's, how much of it am I not seeing? Because even for well-known giant forms like Praya Dubia, length estimates can reach into the tens of meters. And for a Polemia uvaria, there are high-end length records reported in the literature and popular record-keeping sources. Again, measuring is hard. But the existence of very long colonies is not in question. The deep ocean absolutely contains gelatinous colonies whose full length is far beyond what a casual viewer expects. So what's the final "why should I care" point? Because siphonophores are not just a creepy fact. They're a clue to how life solves problems in the deep sea. When food is scarce, build a trap. When chasing is expensive, become a net. When vision is limited, use transparency and bioluminescence. When a single body plan can't do everything well, split the labor into specialized modules, zooids, and coordinate them like organs. That's not just weird, that's brilliant. And it's one of the reasons the deep sea keeps producing creatures that feel like aliens. Because the deep sea pushes evolution into solutions we don't see on land. If you enjoyed this kind of deep ocean reality, real biology that sounds like science fiction, hit like and subscribe, because this Abyss series is going deeper, And every episode is a real phenomenon that sounds impossible until you see how nature actually does it. And next time, we can go from a colony that looks like one jellyfish to something even more personal and disturbing, a predator that uses a single dot of bioluminescent light as a trap, the anglerfish method of hunting in pure darkness. But for now, remember this. At 1,200 meters, the ocean doesn't always send one animal to hunt you. Sometimes it sends a colony, a coordinated living machine, so long you can't see the end of it, because your light isn't big enough to reveal what the darkness is hiding.